Hello and welcome to Discussions on Loss and Grief with Ray Warner, the podcast where we shine a light on the often avoided topics of grief and loss, while also getting to know a little bit about some amazing people who are no longer with us. I'm your host, Ray Warner, and on today's episode, my guest is Lidia Evangelista. And I'm going to be interviewing her about her experience with loss. Lydia, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Ray. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me onto your podcast. I live in a suburb in Chicago, not too far from the city. I am 40 years old, about to turn 41 this month. I'm a spiritual life coach. I think what had led me to become a spiritual life coach was the loss of my late husband. I think in some way it was a catalyst to the next level in my life here. I also am a mother to a 13-year-old daughter named Danny. And yeah, I really enjoy, supporting people, whether it's just through life changes, grief or loss, because again, I think all of that ends up changing and transforming your life in some way.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to start off with, please tell the audience the story of your loss.
Yeah. So again, I met Danny's dad. Well, I knew of him, which is strange. So I think in some way it was like destined for us to come together. I went to high school with his cousins, which they weren't blood cousins. So their families had immigrated here from the Philippines, and so they've all just kind of grown up with each other. I went to high school with his friends. I remember one of my friends was like, "Hey, do you need a date to homecoming?" And I was a bit shy and quiet when it came to boys, so she showed me a picture, and it was of him, and I just declined just because I was like, oh no, I'm okay, and but it was like I remember the picture and I remember it was him. Again, we go through life really not meeting each other or knowing of each other. I go to college and he goes off actually to the Philippines to study nursing. So he goes out there, studies his nursing, and eventually comes back to the States because he's already a citizen. So it's easy for him to kind of just come back and take the test and, become a nurse, which he ended up doing. So that's when we met, was when he came back. I finished college. We come back, we meet, and it was like he was trying to, uh I guess court me, and I was at the time again still kind of hesitant, whatnot. But we came together, we moved in together. And like I said, he had his career as a nurse, and I was at the time working at a non-residential, sorry, not a nonprofit residential home for kids. And so I was doing that. And life for us was just going by really fast. He asked me to get married in Mexico. And little did I know, I was already pregnant. So when we came back, that's when we found out when I came back, we just had some really big news for everyone, engaged and now a baby. I go through my pregnancy, and I have Danny in January of 2011. And then February of 2011, he gets diagnosed with cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so our whole life just kind of turns upside down. We're new parents, and I just have a baby, and I'm on maternity leave, but now I'm not just taking care of a new baby. Now I have to figure out how am I going to kind of take care of my husband, or how we're going to get through this. And in the midst of even that, we're still planning a wedding. So we still wanted to get married, even though like we've got all this on our plate right now. So he had to take a leave from his job as a nurse. He worked at the VA hospital, so he had to take leave, whereas I was able to stay on maternity leave, I think until April, but then I had to go back.
Mhm.
Um, so, we're going through chemo, we're doing radiation. Um, we end up getting married in September of 2011. So, we had this big grand wedding, because at the time he had like just finished all of those treatments. So we're like, okay, this is a great time to celebrate. We
Yeah.
had literally over 300 people at our wedding. Like it was a huge wedding,
Wow.
that we had. Good thing we kind of shared some really, our friends were kind of in common, so it wasn't that big, but I mean, yeah, we had a lot of people. I mean, I think we invited everybody. We had their kids come, like we didn't care. Like we were like, just everybody come. And obviously Daniela was there. She was 9 months at the time. So she was little, but yeah, so it was a great grand wedding. Um, then, again, we just kind of go through the holidays. In March of 2012, we go on like our honeymoon. So we go to Vegas, San Francisco. And when he was out there, he felt like a lump, or he said he could feel something growing like near his throat.
Mhm.
So of course, I'm like, as soon as we get back, you need to call the doctor and we need to get this going, see what's
Yeah.
there. And sure enough, there was some kind of mass now spread there. And so then again, he had to go through chemo, radiation. Eventually, they were talking about like some sort of stem cell transplant to help.
Mhm.
And that was towards the summer of like 2012. So he was getting ready to kind of get hospitalized for that. Something, he came to me and said, I don't know if I'm going to come out of this. And I was like, okay, like, what are you trying to say? And he's like, let's put everything on your name for now. Like, just make sure that it's all for you and Danny. And I'm just kind of like, okay, but again, I didn't want to really face that, or, but maybe
Yeah.
he knew something, I don't know. But so we did what we had to do to kind of prepare. We put him, we get him in the hospital, and it just it wasn't getting any better for him. He was actually getting weaker, and to the point where I think he was in there, I think starting like the end of July, and he didn't come out after that. So at the end of August, he ended up passing away. So it's going to be 12 years since he passed away. This month, August 31st, will mark the 12 years that he's been gone. And I feel like every year is different. Like I know like my body kind of anticipates that like anniversary, and it's also my birthday month. So like I spent my last birthday with him in the hospital. And even though like he was kind of sleeping and like in and out of being awake, like he still managed to like surprise me with like a carrot cake from the hospital, and like
Wow.
have the nurses come in and sing happy birthday to me. So I'll always remember that, that moment of like, he still made the effort to kind of make my
Yeah.
birthday special, even though he was sleeping most of the time. But
Yeah.
um yeah, I think that's again, it's August is a weird month for me, unfortunately, now. And even though it's my birthday and it's a time to celebrate, but then there's this loss, him, even though we still want to celebrate his legacy and who he was. But I think again, like we talk about, like joy and sadness can just exist at the same time. And that's something that I think that I tend to just acknowledge. Like it's a joyous time that I'm turning 41, but it's also sad that like time has passed and he's been gone for that long.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that feeling, that same feeling you have about August with September, because that's when
Mm,
my wife passed. So
okay.
I hear
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah. And
thank
we
you.
married in September too. So like
Mm,
September, it's like August, and then like September hits, and then it's like our wedding anniversary, and we didn't make it to 1 year. So it's like we've never celebrated that anniversary for
mm.
us either.
You get to celebrate yourself for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing. Um, what was the immediate impact of his passing on your life?
Oh, well, I think, I remember like the last night that I had with him, that I could talk with him. I remember asking him, like, what am I gonna do? And him, I mean, he couldn't tell me, he didn't know what to say. He was just like, I don't know either. And so I think it was just like being in that state of like shock and like disbelief, and like I never could have imagined my life being this, like becoming a single mom, becoming a widow, having to raise my daughter on my own. I definitely have had support from like family, his side of the family. Like, I have that really good support system, but still you feel so alone, and like you have to make all of the decisions without a partner, without the other parent.
Mm.
And that's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of pressure. Um, I mean, as my daughter's gotten older, it's like, now I'm going to be thinking about high school, and it's like, I'm like, I don't, I mean, I want to send her to a Catholic school, but like, I got to think of finance, and it's like all on me. Like, who can I talk to about this? Really? Like, it's really going to be my decision, because it's up to what I can and can do for her. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, like I said, the biggest impact has been just like I had to do this on my own, and how much responsibility and pressure has been put on me, um has really tested me, and my patience, and my just my, like, can I like really do this, and just like feeling like just feeling alone in that, and that's really hard. And so I just would like to put that out there for anybody, again, that, and I'm sure, Ray, you can relate to it, as far as, again, your baby was a lot younger than my daughter, but still
Yeah.
they were little, they didn't really get to remember their other parent.
Yeah. Yeah. How has that impact changed over time? Or has it?
Yeah, well, I think in a way it's given me a lot of strength. It's also showed me that like you can do it, even though it's hard and it's not what you wanted, it wasn't ideal. Um, you just kind of accept the challenge. You accept it and you go
Mhm.
forward and you do the best you can. And sometimes you do it kicking and screaming and pissed off and
Yeah.
angry and all of that, but like I think that's the thing, is that you have to acknowledge that like it's not easy. Maybe people look at us and think, oh, it looks so, like, you make it look so easy, or gosh, I could never have done it the way that you did it, and you do it so gracefully. And it's like, yeah, but like you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And um and also when you just don't have a choice, you just do it. And again, even if you don't have like the choice, I could have made a choice and just said, I'm not doing it. I could have, I don't know, I could have gone a different uh route in how I dealt with this. um but I didn't, because obviously I knew my daughter needed me. Was I there? I knew that emotionally I was struggling,
Mhm.
and I was struggling to connect with her. And so I made it uh my priority to get support in, like, with coaching, therapy, so that I can still be present for her as she
Mhm.
grows up, because I know that the grief, if I didn't get support, it could have taken me as far as like as an emotional, to not, I wouldn't have the emotional capacity to be with her.
Yeah.
That would be really, that would be so hurtful for her, like that she can't connect with her mom emotionally because of all the pain and grief that I had within me.
What's you're actually illustrating that there are many ways we can look at this. Like my experience was totally different from yours. I didn't seek out the support, and therefore I couldn't cope.
Mhm.
My support was my daughter ended up living with her grandparents. So what you're illustrating is a beautiful point is we all cope with things in our own ways, and it doesn't make it right or wrong or good or bad. It's just this is just our survival, the way we survive in these early days when the pain is so raw. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I had another question that a follow-up, but um I can't think of it right now. I'm sure it'll come back to me, but um how has your loss changed your view of the future? And has that shifted over time?
Mm. Yeah. I think what really helped me was when I went into the my life coaching program, when I decided to become a life coach. I think that really helped me kind of shift my perspective on life and how I could create uh, the life that I want to live, right? So it gave me a sense of hope and faith and even some trust back because again, I was completely angry with God. I was completely just kind of done with spirituality. And or Catholic faith and everything. So I remember going to an observation for the program, and the topic was on spirituality.
Mm,
And so that's why I feel like, in some way, like spirit has kind of been chasing me a little bit, like, hey, you know, kind of trying to get my attention in some
mhm,
sense. And so and I'm still working on it, like I'm still working on my spirituality, I'm still working on my belief system and all of that, because it's just, we're human still, regardless. At the end of the day, I'm still a human being. And so I think I definitely have an outlook of like a second chance, like just because I lost my husband doesn't mean that I can't have a second chance at another great relationship, or, you know, uh, a romantic partnership that can maybe be marriage or just a long term. Um, but again, just it's just about rebuilding and starting over again. And it's been difficult. Like it's not easy, but that's the thing that you want to create is not going to be easy. Like that's the thing,
mhm,
is like we can have these grand goals and dreams, and that's beautiful, but it does take practice, and it
yeah.
takes courage and strength to really go after what you want. And so um I kind of, again, I experience still the moments of grief, even with that, going towards what I want. It
Mm,
doesn't always happen or land the way that I wanted it to land. And so I've had to really kind of be with, again, the joy and the grief, and um, around even getting a second chance at what I want in life, and like what
mm,
I had dreamed with her dad, like
yeah.
obviously I had wanted us to be a family and have the house and the kids and just, grow in that sense. But I've moved forward with buying my own house with her when I think she was about to start kindergarten. So I bought us our home, our first home, and we're still in that first home. And, so I've done things that I would have done with her father,
Mhm,
to kind of keep that dream alive. And so that's what I continue to do, is to keep that alive, even though sometimes it's hard,
yeah.
but I'm trying. And I think that's the main thing, is that as long as you continue to try.
Mm. So what I'm hearing you say is reinvention while also use keeping the pieces of what your future looked like before in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Because again, yeah, I feel like again there's those missing pieces, but like at the same time I have to reinvent the life that I will be living. And then if it does happen with a partner, well, what are his pieces? And like, do those pieces fit with my pieces? Or, again, it's like really learning how to collaborate with someone else as well. Like with her dad, like I said, we were a total of 6 years together. Like if I look at it, we had a
Yeah.
total of 6 years all together, and um, we had our ups and our downs and this and that. So it's like, yeah, like I have to learn how I would be with another person as well, and how do I create and grow with that person too. So there's a lot there as far as like you were saying, the whole reinvention, and even just like I said, rebuilding a life that I feel like was a future that was taken away too soon for me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Beautiful. So let's shift a little bit. What advice would you give to somebody who has just experienced a loss like this?
yeah. Well, I think, and you mentioned this was like really like leaning into those uncomfortable feelings.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really hard, I know, to really feel that, or acknowledge it. If you can give yourself grace and like compassion. And I know that's hard because again, I think a lot of times we don't know how to give it to ourselves. Maybe we can give it to other people and it's easier to kind of give it to other people, but like I guess and I'm trying to understand like that sadness, that anger. I think that's really it's important because I was very afraid of my anger. I didn't want to feel my sadness. And I think that's the thing, is that I had to really sit with it. And it doesn't even start right at that moment. Sometimes we do suppress it, or we try to numb it, or we just don't feel it in some way. And sometimes it doesn't happen until later on down the road, even now. Like
Mhm.
I feel like I really have like opened the can of worms around anger and sadness and grief just because of other maybe losses that I've experienced. And so
Mhm.
like it just takes you back to that moment when you experienced the first major loss.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really going to be like, again, acknowledging those really uncomfortable feelings, anger, sadness, um, maybe even overwhelm.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned anger because while yes, it's part of the classic steps of grief, the stages of grief, anger is not something that a lot of people think of when they think of grief. It's usually sadness. But speaking for myself, being angry that she left me, that and it comes out of nowhere, and it's almost like I make myself wrong for feeling angry about that, which, logical mind says it's not her fault, it wasn't her choice, but it's that limbic emotional brain. It's like, how dare you leave me? And that's the kind of thing that is doesn't get talked about enough, I don't think.
Yeah, no, and I could relate to that. And I would say, and again, and I've had those conversations with myself where I'm like angry at him for leaving because it's like you left me with our daughter. And again, I know they didn't purposely leave us. It's not like they left us on purpose, or it was a choice for like they had no choice. Like
Mhm.
they died.
Yeah.
But it feels that wound of abandonment
Hmm.
is still
Exactly.
there. And it's like, even though again like you said, like logically they didn't leave us intentionally, but there's a part of us that feels like it was done intentionally, like
Yeah.
because you're hurting so bad, and it's like I want to just kind of acknowledge that, like, yeah, like I feel the same way. And I'm glad that we're able to talk about it and say it here, because what if, again, someone's going through a similar feeling, like, around being angry at the person that passed away, that
Mhm.
didn't mean to leave them, but you're human
Yeah.
and what you feel is valid.
And what you said about giving yourself grace, especially in cases like this, especially when, you're feeling feelings that logically don't make sense. Emotions aren't logical, and you get to give yourself grace.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think that's 100% part of that process to support you in your healing. And again, if you're not sure how to do that, that's why I would hope that, people reach out to those that have experienced it. And that's, I think, why we do what we do, right? It's like, I want to be that person to support you and help you learn how to give yourself a little bit of grace around the loss and the grief. Because again, we're just taught to kind of beat ourselves up over it, or it's
Mhm.
our fault, or we could have done more. Like, again, the survivor's guilt, I'm sure,
Yep.
is another theme
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
we also go through, is that, like, well, I'm here and this person's gone. How do I live my life fully without this person? So
Hmm.
again, it's very complicated in this in grief, whether it's the loss of a spouse, a child, a parent. It's definitely complicated for people, and
Yeah.
really learn, like, sitting with all of those, like you said, emotions around it.
And not making yourself wrong for feeling any of those emotions. That's the big one. That's really big. It's huge. That's what I was making myself wrong when I was first going through it. And that's what does not work for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think I always say we're our worst critic in all of this. So we're going to critique ourselves
Yeah.
in this process too, like, I should have done more. I could have done more. What if we would have done this, or what if we would have done that, or what if I
Hmm.
would have done this? And
Yep.
yeah, so I think it's just really acknowledging, like, how you are speaking to yourself in these moments of grief.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to the family and friends of someone who's just experienced a loss on how to be around them from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as far as family and friends, they'll check on you, and I think that's always a great thing. But I would say, don't stop checking on the person, or acknowledging those anniversaries, or just whatever it is that, like, if you know that your friend who or family member who has lost somebody, and it's been years, like, continue to check on them. I think, again, what happens, and it's understandable, everybody goes back to their lives and their routines, and I get it. Um, but we're still grieving. We may grieve and we are going to grieve for the rest of our lives. Like,
Yeah.
um, but it's just, like I said, again, I think just a check-in. And there's nothing that you have to say that, like, to make us feel better, or it can just be this, I was thinking about you. I'm sure
Mm.
it's hard, still hard, that JR's not here
Yeah.
with you, or that you've been just doing it on your own for this long, and I'm proud of you, something like that.
Yeah.
I think just acknowledging the person um, would be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's definitely that's what from my experience too. Don't avoid the person. Don't avoid us when we've lost somebody. That's when we need you the most. That's when we need people and support the most, is when after we've experienced loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes, yes. And and I know the avoidance, comes from just their own uncomfortable feelings around it. I totally get it. Um, but again, I think we're all going to experience this. Maybe, like I said, again, some of us have experienced it sooner than others.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I feel like, okay, well, I guess I'm here to pave some kind of way for whoever I meet down the line, uh,
Mhm.
to support them in their grief and loss. And it doesn't necessarily even just have to be like another widow or widower. Like I feel like I've supported people with just general loss, or a loss of a parent or a
Mhm.
pet or a job, a
Yeah,
relationship, because it feels the same, the grief, at least the emotions that you go through. It's just in different forms.
exactly. Yeah. Loss is a loss is a loss. It's not always because someone has passed away. It could be, like you said, loss of a job, being laid off, a pet. Pets are, family members too.
Mhm.
So one final question. Tell us about JR. Bring him to life with your words so that the listeners can feel as if they knew him.
Okay. Well, Jer was definitely the life of the party. He was very outgoing. I feel like he knew so many people just with his energy, and he had one of those laughs where you can like hear it from across the room. He had just that distinct laugh about him, and a smile that could brighten a room. Was always telling jokes, inappropriate jokes too. And, he was just, I mean, he was a jokester, and he was very outgoing. And I think, I feel like in some way, I kind of like just kind of always let him have the spotlight. And it's funny that when I was like going through like having Danny and everything, he made a joke like, "Ah, I can't even let you have the spotlight for a little bit, after having this baby. Is like, here I gotta go get cancer and take it away again." And that was just him. Like he was just always making a light of a situation,
Mm.
so he definitely did that. And I saw also those moments where, yeah, it wasn't very, it really scared him, and and everything that he was going through. But obviously to the world he would show that he was this big funny jokester. And also he was also one to make sure you felt seen, so I think a lot of people from like high school, like they would message me and tell me stories like, he always made me feel seen, or he made sure I was included uh
Mm.
in whatever it was what we were doing. But he had a story about anything, and it would make me laugh hysterically, because sometimes I would be like, did that really happen? Like, he told me one time coming out of a Target store that he was walking, minding his business, but he could tell this woman was about to steal, and she had this cart full of all the stuff. And sure enough, as he's walking out, here she goes and runs into him, and he falls on the floor, and she goes, takes off, stealing all the merchandise. And I'm like, did this really happen? He goes, yeah. He's like, I'm so sorry on my back. And I couldn't stop laughing, because I'm just like, how does that happen? Like, how do you get hit with a cart? Like, but I mean, again, that's just who he was. He was, like I said, very funny. And, you know, uh, he adored Daniela. Like, Daniela was his pride and joy. Like, he couldn't wait to be a dad. And he was a good husband. We may not have been married for a long time, but like, he he was my first love. He was my first love. And I think, like I said, we grew together,
Mm.
in as far as like as much as we could,
Yeah.
as a couple. Like, we stayed with each other, like our wedding vows. We did it till death do you part, um and I was glad that I could walk him until that the final breaths, because I was there when he took his final breaths. I actually feel like he heard me kind of let him know that we'll be okay. It's okay to go now. Um, and once I had said that to him, and again, we at that time he wasn't, he couldn't talk anymore. It was just basically breathing on the machine. And so after I had said, it's okay that we'll be okay. And as soon as I kind of stepped away from his bedside, he took three final big breaths in, and then he stopped breathing. So I think in a way, like when you can let someone kind of walk them through that and like let them go,
Mm,
I mean, it takes so much courage and strength to do that. And doesn't mean that it makes it any easier with other things, but like that's why I think I feel like in some way maybe we were destined to be together up until this point. And so, like I said, he brought a lot of joy, um, humor, and laughter into my life. And I think I'm again still trying to find that again within myself.
yeah.
Uh, so he keeps that reminds me and keeps me going as far as like why I'm still here and to continue to be joy and to continue to laugh and have fun.
Mhm. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing him with us. I feel like I got to know him a little bit from hearing you talk about him.
Well, I'm
Thank
glad that I got to share that. I appreciate you letting me be on your podcast so that I could share my story and share him. And I hope that it supports anyone else going through a major loss, whether that's, again, a actual person or just something in their life that was taken away or that they did lose.
you. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for listening. Again, this is Discussions on Loss and Grief with Ray Warner. Next episode, we'll have another guest, and we'll be talking more about grief and loss and learning all about somebody special who's no longer with us.